Yo, what's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and a lot of the teams have officially qualified for Worlds. It's not completely finished yet, but now is as good a time as any for a way too early Worlds preview. Um, let's see. When do the play-ins start? Well, that's not it. We don't know what the start date is, but we know what the end date is. I don't know how that makes any sense. All right. So we're going to go through the teams that have qualified so far. But before we do that, let's take a look at some of the upcoming qualifying matches. There's really only two matches, I think, that I care about. So the LCL, I just really don't care about that. Based off of name recognition, I would say probably Unicorns of Love. Let's see if we recognize any of the players. Not really. And then we have No Man's Ahahasik Boss. So I would assume that Unicorns of Love ends up winning that. I don't really think I would suggest betting that. But that's fine. There's actually a match coming up in 25 minutes. So that's Rensga Esports against Red Canids, and those are both teams from Brazil. Rensga is a team that I was kind of very interested to see what would happen with them before the split started because of their mid jungle duo. So they have Croc and Yuri, and it's the reason why it's interesting is because we have seen players from Korea go over to Brazil and be very good, but not necessarily translate that into Worlds success. But when you have two not connected players, like when it was Jackpot and I forget the mid laner's name, last year when we were on that one team, I think it was Liberty. The difference is that mid jungle is it's much easier to play them off one another in the game, especially in the early and mid game. So it's good to see that kind of synergy in the mid lane. I would assume that Rensga wins this match because I think that those two players specifically are more talented than what Red Canids has. And I don't watch a ton of Brazilian League of Legends, just because I don't have enough time in the day to watch every single game of every single region, working a full-time job. But it's the team that I want to see because I would like the story of Rensga making it all the way to Worlds for the play-ins. I think that, or actually, I don't know if they'd be in the play-ins or if they'd be in the actual main event automatically qualified for play-ins. Okay, so Brazil's only guaranteed to make it to the play-ins. All right. So, and before I forget, first of all, I don't know if Gelati watches my videos often, but Gelati's stepping away from his long form sports betting stuff. Gelati's done a great job for a long time. I think that it's a well-deserved break. I bet if I was betting on it, I would say that he's not gone for long. And sometimes, you just need to rework how you're going about your work, and it'll make it better long term, and it'll make it more sustainable. So, Gelati, if you are watching this, good luck with your break, and I'm sure you'll figure it all out. I also wanted to thank everybody in the Discord community. Matt was talking to me the other day about being hyped up for League of Legends, and it's interesting how many people in the Discord had no interest in League of Legends a year ago, 2 years ago, and now it's something that they just absolutely love. But all the active people in Discord, I really do appreciate it. I appreciate the support on Patreon and everything like that. It really it's funny because I know that there are a lot of people out there who say more about what they think about games, but at some point, I really think, especially for DraftKings, it's not that relevant. You can deep dive into a lot of these teams and try to look at different metrics that make your play sound better or sound worse. But at the end of the day, I think that talent evaluation and reading the room, thinking about how other people think about these teams is really where the biggest edges are. Like if you're like a max player and you're playing 150 lineups or whatever the max number of lineups is for a competition, there are small edges that you can gain, and over time that's going to be actionable. But for most people, I think the most actionable way for people to play lower numbers of lineups is more about like game theory and just playing what you believe in a very non-statistical way, which is funny because I'm generally not that kind of person. But in a game where it's like, 5 to 10 lineups versus 70 lineups, you can't approach it the same way and expect to have as good, if not better, results. So that's all I wanted to say about that. Everybody in the Discord community that's super active, you know who you are. Matt, JB, Baby Goat, Prophecy, Q, Holdiel. Holdiel's been like very, very active, especially recently. Teleplaya, Pride of Cucamonga, AWOL, Swerve Baby, always popping in and out. But yeah, so thanks everybody. If I missed your name and you felt like you should have been mentioned, feel free to yell at me in Discord. Dingo, of course. So let's look at some of these teams that have already qualified. So for the play-in stage, I'm not really super interested in a lot of these teams. Like we can take a look at rosters and see if we recognize anybody. So let's see what we can do. Babip, so he's a pretty popular player. Halo's a pretty popular player, I think. I'm probably not going to be playing much of them early on, so that would be like a potential way to be different, not necessarily a good thing, but a way to be different. In the Turkish league, we have Galatasaray, who is one of the biggest sports organizations in Turkey for like basketball and soccer. I think they're bigger in soccer than basketball, but I think that they kind of have all of these different sports teams now. Irene was a former professional player. He had some good showings domestically, but I don't think he ever had a big international tournament. Crazy, I'm not familiar with Crazy. I don't know if they made a name for themselves in Korea before they went over. Okay, Crazy looks very familiar. They probably name changed. Crazy play. Why am I thinking that they were somebody else? Alright, well that's fine. Definitely seems familiar. Not a huge fan of a team like this. They have a chance. Like Turkey has a pretty good domestic league, so if they get some like softer matchups, they could do well in the play-in stage and they could qualify for the next round, depending on what their group looks like. So definitely an interesting thing to consider. But this is also a good time to remember that last year Turkey played pretty well, so people will probably overvalue them. Like if that's your only argument for using Galatasaray is that a different team played well from Turkey last year, then it's probably a pretty thin perspective to have. Infinity from Latin America. So we've seen some of these players before. We've seen Bugax? Wasn't Bugax the name of the guy that won that Fortnite competition? Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. Don't really recognize many of these names. Ackerman, I know Ackerman. But I feel like Ackerman's another name where maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. No, yeah, this is him, I guess. Right? We've definitely seen that player before. But I don't have any actionable information on that. Beyond Gaming from the PCS. So the fact that they beat... Salute. The fact that they came out of the PCS is a good sign for them. Like, there's a difference between being a team that is from a good region, and there's a difference between that and from a region that has done well at a world championship. Because, like, PCS has a longer-term history of having pretty good players. And I think they also are on a server that overlaps a lot with Korea and the rest of China. So they have a lot of good competition in their day-to-day games. C9, people are going to be low on C9, but they're not going to be low on C9 during the play-in stage. So our edge with C9 won't start taking effect until the main stage, where if I'm right and they're more talented than they've shown so far, then the main stage is where they should really show out. Kind of the same thing for Rogue. I think that Rogue's more recent performances are somewhat concerning. They've had some like bad, not bad drafts, in terms of like the champions that they're picking or in the order in which that they're picking, but their strategy is bad. Like they make draft decisions that are reasonable, and you can't like point at it and say, oh wow, like this champion is garbage. But you can say, like, why would you go for that style of team composition against a team like Mad Lions, against a team like Fnatic? Why are the coaches making these weird types of decisions? And that is somewhat concerning, especially for a team like Rogue, who ultimately is not going to be able to play to the same level of bloodiness as these other teams. I think that if we see Rogue play well during the main stage, it's going to be through playing intelligent early games, carving out leads, and then either holding on to that lead for dear life and fighting around big objectives, or manipulating the map and playing more of like a macro style of game. And I know that Rogue doesn't necessarily need to do that domestically, but when you're playing against these better teams from China, these better teams from Korea, you need to basically do something very well. And because of the form of Rogue right now, it's kind of difficult to see what they would do well against the tougher competition. But in this play-in stage, they should be one of the 3 or 4 best teams. They should be, but we'll see what actually ends up happening. And then Hanwha Life really got their shit together by the end of the season, which is funny. Morgan started playing more in the top lane, which is good. Let's go to their most recent matches. So, ever since they switched to Willer, this is when they started playing better in general. So they had... okay, maybe not. They lost to KT, beat Fredit, beat DRX, lost to Nongshim, tough match, lost to Sandbox. Sandbox has been playing well. Lost to a Freak of Freaks, not great. Beat T1, so a very good win, and then beat Sandbox, good win. So this should be the roster that we see. And before the season started, when I was talking about Morgan and how I like Morgan as a player, it's because of stuff like this. He plays a lot of champions that are very strong, and can allow him to win the game. So champions like Camille, if you put Morgan up against like almost any top laner in Europe or North America in a carry-on-carry matchup, there's a chance that he goes completely insane and just wins the entire game for his team. Willer plays a lot of different champions, so Gwen and Viego, those are both good things to see. Viego was being banned out a little bit against them, but not much. This kind of lets you know other teams' reads of Hanwha Life, so they're more concerned with things like Renekton, Irelia, because of Chovy, LeBlanc. So a lot of diverse champions, which is a good thing to see. They have a matchup for Kennen, so that's another good thing to see, because we do expect to see Kennen a decent amount at Worlds. But Hanwha Life is just a very talented team who has been pretty bad for the entire year relative to expectations. Chovy, still one of the best mid laners in the world. Deft, I think, is part of the reason why they've had a tough time. But now that they've made it to Worlds, they have a chance to make some noise. I would be very surprised if they kind of laid an egg in the play-in stage. So we should get 4 teams. So out of the 4 teams, I would expect it to be either World Elite or LNG, which is the other match. Oh, did we go through that? I guess we did. That's the other match the LPL match for their last seed for Worlds. I really hope World Elite wins, but I think it's probably better from a DraftKings perspective if LNG wins, because people will be less excited about LNG and would be more willing to pick against LNG. The thing is, with World Elite, they play such a bloody playstyle, they can kind of just out talent other teams more easily. LNG will also be more talented than the other teams in the play-in stage. It's just that their playstyle doesn't utilize talent as much as it utilizes like intelligence, and like game knowledge. So there's that. And then the rest of the teams, we have a team that still has to qualify from Vietnam. Somebody might lose a seed. It might be VCS. They might not be able to go to Worlds. I think I read something about that. So I'm just going to go through the rest of the teams and we'll talk about some information about those teams. So PSG. So from PCS, we get Hanabi, River. River's a good player. Maple's a good player. A good enough player. Kai Wing, Unified. So I think this is the exact same team that they had last year. I think this is the team they had last year, but then they had to swap out some players because of COVID. PSG Talent is a partnership. Yeah, so PSG Talent should be interesting. They did pretty good last year, so I think that a lot of players will be willing to play them again, which is probably something I'd want to like pump the brakes on. I don't necessarily care about last year's performance. They do have some talented players, so it'll be more matchup dependent, trying to see how the meta shakes out and where the advantages and disadvantages in lane come from like the different strengths of the different teams that are there. So that's going to be more matchup dependent. Team Liquid. Last year I won 20 grand with Team Liquid at Worlds. So that was fun. Alphari, Santorin, Jensen, Tactical, Core, JJ. I am somewhat concerned with Team Liquid because I don't think that they're talented enough to compete with a lot of these teams. And I don't like their play style in general for League of Legends. So for League of Legends on DraftKings, I think that it's going to be a similar spot to last year where I felt the exact same way, but I was willing to play them in a lineup because they were a huge underdog. So if they're a huge underdog and they're able to win the match, then that's where their DraftKings scoring is going to be good. If they're the team that feels like they should be better than the other team, there's a much higher chance that they play a slower pace of game. So that's a little concerning. I need to do a player ranking thing, but I'll wait until everybody's qualified for this before I do that. 100 Thieves. So I'm happy that 100 Thieves pulled it together, and it seems like everybody had 100 Thieves futures going into the year because of the amount of talent on this team. It'll be very fun to watch someday in an international tournament again. At Worlds again, like at a big world championship like this with a solid team around him, because this is a good spot for someday. Someday's in a good spot in the meta right now. Closer, Abadage, and FBI, they do legitimately have 4 different players that they could theoretically play around. I think that they're going to probably be a better team at Worlds than Team Liquid, because Team Liquid, like, they can play around top lane, they can play around bot lane, but most of the time I don't think that you can play through Jensen. I don't think that you can play through Santorin in the international events in like a bloody play style. I think that would put too much stress on their drafts because they'd have to index way too much into early game, which is really not. It's really not an optimal way to play right now. The thing is with Team Liquid is that they draft early game champions a lot of the time, and like play through their strength, but they don't snowball their strength a lot of the time. It's more like they carve out a big enough edge to where they know that they're winning the game, and then they just try to play it a little bit too slow for my liking. But we'll see how that plays out at Worlds. It really does come down to what the meta looks like. If the meta slows down a lot and kind of does what it did last year, then maybe that's a good thing for Team Liquid, but whatever. 100 Thieves, good team. I think that they have a good chance to beat a lot of these higher level teams out here because of their talent level. Especially in top lane. I think that Alphari is a good carry top laner, is a very good Western top lane carry player. It'll be interesting to see how they kind of go about playing carry versus carry in the top lane against better top laners, because that seems super difficult for Team Liquid. For 100 Thieves, they're more likely to play like even or losing matchups in the top lane because they know someday can handle it and still be impactful in the late game. Fnatic is just a team that I'm going to be against at Worlds for sure. They're going to have insanely bloody games that should be very good for DraftKings scoring. It's always going to be important to know who is Fnatic playing, who is the team that's most likely, who has the highest chance to get like a 30 kill game because they're playing against Fnatic. Everybody knows that I dislike Fnatic at this point, so there's not much sense in talking more about it. I think it's going to be very easy for people to convince themselves that Fnatic is a lot better than they are, which will be a good thing. It's not only in line with how I view Fnatic, it's going to be the more actionable side of things, especially in matchups against North American teams or European teams or the lesser region teams, because Adam is good. Adam is not good on the international level. Bwipo is good. Bwipo might be good on the international level. Nisqy is good. Nisqy is not good on the international level. If Nisqy carries Fnatic deep into Worlds through playing mechanically intensive champions and not like situational champions like Twisted Fate or something like that, or if he's just getting like ridiculous carry champions like Akali or something and just can just go even in the early laning phase and then play well in the late game, which just means picking up a bunch of kills that he didn't really earn, then feel free to come back and yell at me in the comments. Upset and Hylissang. Hylissang always is a threat to die 10 times in a game, and Upset is just a generic AD carry player, which will require the meta being a late game meta for Upset to get the most out of Upset. So that's kind of what I'd be against with them. Mad Lions, pretty similar. I think that I'm just lower on Europe in general than a lot of other people because I don't see the gigantic differences between Europe and North America's top teams. The fact that there's a lot more parity in Europe in terms of like teams that kind of look good makes people think that the region's better overall, but it just means that the ceiling is lower than people think it is and their floor is higher than they think it is. In North America, it's like the ceiling isn't very high, but there is no floor. So you can kind of have these teams that are absolute garbage that would like be one of the worst teams in any major region. Armut, after last year's World performance, this is why they brought him in. Hopefully he has another good showing. The thing I do like about Mad Lions is the way they approach pick ban, because they, in my opinion, are just a better version of Fnatic. Like, I like Bwipo more than I like Elyoya, but I like Humanoid more than I like Nisqy. I like Armut and Adam about the same, and I like Carzzy and Kaiser a lot more than Upset and Hylissang from the like domination perspective. Like they just seem much more likely to absolutely roll in the early game, which is always beneficial for us. With T1, it'll be interesting to see what they do with their roster, like who they decide to bring to Worlds. I think that this is another opportunity for Keria to show that they're one of the best supports in the world. I know that doesn't necessarily line up with like their kill scores and everything, but if you just look at League of Legends as an actual game where like players are making decisions that are trying to help their team win the game and not trying to make a good kill score, I think people would be much more appreciative of Keria. I know that there's probably a lot of frustrated people out there from DraftKings perspective with Keria because he has a lot of bad performances where like their team will go 2-0 and he'll have like 40 or 50 DraftKings points because he went like 0, 4, and 6 by like creating a good game state, or multiple good game states while his team wins. Kana's a very good player. Like this is the kind of thing where think about Kana versus Alfari. Who would you rather have? You'd rather have Kana. I think there are people out there who will say that the top lane matchup is close when I really don't think it's close. If T1 puts Kana into a bad matchup, then yes, Alfari can win that matchup. That's like saying it's like in football where you know that the other team is a pass heavy offense and you keep putting out like run stopping defenses. If the team that's good at passing the ball can beat a run defense, you shouldn't be impressed. It's like the team that was calling the defensive play just made a mistake. So if Kana goes out there and has the weaker side of a matchup and loses, it's not because the other player is so much better than them. It's because they made a potential mistake in draft that they have to play around. It's a weakness that they bring onto themselves that they have to manage during the game. So I'm very excited for T1 at Worlds this year. I really do hate that they're going back and forth between Teddy and Gumayusi. I think that it will depend on it's going to depend on what meta is best at Worlds and the champions that are best at Worlds to see who plays. Gumayusi probably is just the more volatile player in general and has the higher ceiling in terms of volatility. But I don't know if they're going to want to do that at Worlds. So we'll see how that goes. I'm very excited for T1. I think that when they start releasing the odds for World Champion and everything, T1 will probably be a good bet. Even though they're very popular. Genji, Rascal, Clid, BDD, Ruler, Life. Very good team. They're different stylistically. They're a little bit more slow. They remind me more of like a Team Liquid kind of team. But that just shows like... And I will do this when I go through like a more in-depth breakdown of all these teams. I think that it'll be important to know what style teams are going into their matchups, like their tendencies of are they more going to be an aggressive early game team or are they trying to scale? Because if you get two teams that are trying to play the early game, you're going to get a bloody game. If you have one team playing bloody, one team playing like a macro style of game, then it depends on who gets the early game lead. So, we'll think about that further down the road. But a really solid roster overall. I think because of how many expectations they've had throughout the years and haven't been able to fulfill, I think that's one of the reasons why players don't love Genji, even though they were formerly Samsung Galaxy who won the championship. But wait, yeah, basically they have big expectations as an organization, and their inability to beat Damwon and T1 consistently gives people a lesser opinion of them. When if they were in like China. If they were in the West, they'd be the best team in the West. If they were in China, they'd be a title contender as well. It's just like the top 4/5 teams in Korea are very competitive. Damwon, the world champs, going from Naguri to Khan shouldn't make that big of a difference. I think if the meta does go into a Kennen meta, then Naguri would be the better player to have, but Khan's a good enough player. Canyon, Showmaker, Ghost Barrel, they've had a lot of struggles throughout the year, still won the championship, still one of the best teams in the world, and I think that all of the bad feelings from this season will make people play them less than they should, so that's another good spot. I think that Damwon, at least in the beginning of the tournament, will probably be under-owned, and then RNG, RNG is a team that I'm going to actively bet against at Worlds. I think that Xiaohu is a very good player. Xiaohu is almost being overrated at this point, which is crazy because Xiaohu is probably one of the best League of Legends players in the world. So it's like kind of splitting hairs. It's just that Xiaohu's talent level doesn't necessarily fall in line with how RNG drafts around him a lot of the time. When they get into these extended best of fives, sometimes they just give up a top lane matchup so that they can play around somebody else, which is pretty frustrating. Wei is a pretty good jungler. Cryan is a pretty good mid laner, but they're not as good as a lot of the other mid laners at this competition. Gala is probably the most overrated player in the world right now. Gala is at least league average in China for sure. But people who say that he's like the best AD carry in China or one of the best AD carries in the world, I just don't see it. I don't think that they're an elite player. I think that they were very good at a few champions, and that allowed them to look very good. But it's not going to translate between metas, I don't think. It's possible I could be very wrong about that, but if Gala is the focal point of this team, I don't think that they make it very far at Worlds. Ming, good player. FPX is one of the most exciting teams to watch because of their playstyle, how they approach the game, their willingness to take fights that they shouldn't fight, that most people shouldn't fight. They're just always looking for those kinds of advantages. Doinby is arguably a top 5 player all time, probably at this point. Like their playstyle, their ability to play a bunch of different champions in the mid lane, the way that they impact the game, the way that they read the game and understand the game. Doinby might be like the most not intelligent. Maybe intelligent is not the right word. The intuitively the strongest player in League of Legends history, maybe. Just really love watching Doinby play. The problem with this team is that Nuguri's a good player, but there are spots where they're going to draft like just not intelligently and put him into a bad matchup. Tian is a good player, but not a great player anymore. Good enough to win a world championship for sure, but they're not going to be the winning difference unless they completely draft diff these other teams and just, get snowballs in early games and stuff like that. You can't depend on Tian at this point, I think is the point that I'm trying to make, to be the focal point of your team. Doinby is a god. LWX and Crisp, I really don't like LWX and Crisp. I think that they're just not very good. They are riding the coattails of Doinby, and if you can do your job and be good enough, then fine. It'll come down to like them drafting intelligently, which is fine. Like FPX is one of the better drafting teams in the world from like a uniqueness perspective. And a lot of that comes from giving top lane and mid lane flexibility while you're playing generic picks in jungle and bot lane. So FPX should be a fun team to root for at the World Championship. FPX is probably also FPX. If LNG makes it, LNG will be the most actionable team probably in terms of people not giving them enough credit. FPX is right there though. I do think FPX is better than EDG. And the finals played out exactly how I thought that. I did say that I thought FPX would win, but I knew EDG's win condition. Like, it was obviously Viper. Like, I think Scout got MVP. Viper is the reason why EDG is allowed to play the way that they play. Flandre is a good top laner. He's been a good top laner for a long time. Not a great top laner, but a good top laner. Definitely a world champion caliber player, if somebody else is the focal point. Jai, good player, not a great player. They're probably also going to bring Junjia to Worlds, and they might go back and forth depending on which champions are strong. Scout, good mid laner. I think I watched John at one point saying that he was like overrated at this point. I think it's probably true in the same way that Jensen is overrated. Like, they will have very good performances, and you'll remember why we have such a high opinion of the player, but they're past their prime at this point. Viper is potentially the best AD carry in the world. Viper is definitely better than Gala. Viper is definitely better than LWX. Gala is definitely better than Ghost. Definitely better than Teddy. Definitely better than Gumayusi. Maybe not better than Ruler, but they're probably close. That's just the way that it is. Like, it is a team game, but you can still tell that Viper is one of the elite mechanical players in the world, which is very cool. I'm just so happy that they didn't get their entire career ruined because of the Griffin fiasco. And then they have Mako. So without knowing any of the numbers, if I was just going to make a bet for who was going to win Worlds based off of what I just talked through, I think that the line that I'm going to like the best, maybe it's Gen G. If we get into a meta, if we get into a late game team fighting meta, then I think that Viper and Ruler have chances to win, to like carry throughout all of Worlds, just like Huanfeng did last year. But if it's more of a team centric, like jungle mid lane top half of the map kind of meta, then Damwon's going to have a pretty big advantage again. But then FPX would also have a really good shot. So those are really the 4 teams that I'd be looking at. I don't think RNG has a chance to really do it. I want T1 to do well, but I'm not convinced. I do want T1 to win though. So that's basically it. I know I guess it's a pretty chalky take, but if I had to pick one team without seeing the lines, I would assume that I like Gen G's line the best. So we'll see. That's all I got for you today. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later.